Teletandem and its influence on identity, motivation, and autonomy. Y nuestra ponente es Paula Angélica Zulaika Gómez. Actualmente ella es directora del Departamento de Lenguas del ITESO, Universidad Jesuita de Guadalajara. Se ha especializado en el uso de tecnología en la enseñanza de aprendizaje de lenguas, coordinó los programas de semipresencial y virtual de inglés, este último de su autoría. Además del proyecto de Teletandem en ITESO de 2012 a 2018. Sus áreas de investigación son aprendizaje virtual y Teletandem. Publicó el artículo Deconstructing Language Learners, Feelings of Inferiority to Teletandem en revista Rogel, Brasil, en diciembre de 2018. Pues le dejamos la palabra a la maestra.
Muchas gracias. Okay, this talk is going to be in English. Is that okay with everybody? Okay, perfect. Okay, we're going to get started. Okay, first of all, I'm going to give you a little context on the project at ITESO, which is the university where I work. The first part of this presentation comes from the article that was just mentioned, Deconstructing Language Learners' Feeling of Inferiority through Teletandem. And at the end, I have a link for the article if you want to see it, but I'm adding to what's the next step in my research. Okay, so just to give you a quick context, the project started in ITESO in 2012. We started with out-of-classroom, with one of our out-of-classroom experience of Teletandem, and then since 2013 to the present, we've done in classroom, we've done some out-of-classroom, and we've done some independent tandem. We started with this through the Jesuit network, the Latin American Association of Jesuit Universities, and the U.S. Association of Jesuit Universities started with a Teletandem project, and that's how we got involved. Now, when I inherited this project, the first thing I noticed is that students were coming into the classroom shy at best, or very combative. And I started wondering why this was happening, because as you know, Teletandem is based on reciprocity and equality. So why were my students feeling this way? And I started thinking that it came with the baggage that they came in with to the session. So what was this baggage that my students were coming in with? It had to do with cultural background. It had to do with circumstances. And I realized that each partner comes in with very specific circumstances. And from that, I started being very interested in the topic of identity. What is our students' identity and how they see the other? That was the basis of my research. And of course, identity and also attitude towards the target language, those two things, had an impact on motivation, okay? Why were my students studying English? And how this session, this experience was motivating them to continue on that quest. And of course, the conference we are at, how all of these has an impact on autonomy. So that was the basis of my topics of research. Okay, so to understand this, what I needed to do was to look at the profile of the students from my university. Those were the Mexican students studying English that were going to have a session with mostly US students. We've done some sessions with Canada, but mostly our US students that are studying Spanish. So to start, the contact with the target language. As you know, as us Mexicans, we've been in contact with English from a very early age. And the students that our students were working with not necessarily had contact with Spanish from an early age. Okay, maybe if they were heritage speakers, like a previous lecture we've had here, but most of the students that we work with are not heritage speakers. So all the students maybe had their first contact with Spanish later on, maybe in high school or maybe even all the way to college. So that's a big difference. Another one, as you know, with Mexicans, this We laugh a lot about our inferiority complex, but this has a deep cultural root. Let's think about the concept of malinchismo, for example, right? This love-hate that we have with everything that is foreign, okay? And now for the topic of English, the attitude that Mexicans have towards English is also a love-hate relationship, because it does have to do with our feelings, like towards the conqueror. Before it was the Spaniards, and now we have, because our tense relationship with the United States of America, the language English, even though there are other English-speaking countries, for us it tends to merge together. Okay, so that affects the attitude that the students may have to the language. And as opposed to that, the students that we work with from our partner university, most of them are native speakers of English, which is a lingua franca. So there's this contrast between us, that we know that you need to learn English, or if you're a native speaker of a language where you really don't have a need. It's a big plus if you learn another language, but it's not. You already speak a lingua franca, okay? And then the third point was the enrollment in the class. Why were these students enrolled in the class, as opposed to the experience of UNAM, the Mediateca? In this case, both sides were students from a language class. So the experience, in a way, was tied to the class and to their grade, okay? But it's very different. At our university, as is the case at a lot of private universities in Mexico, there is an English language requirement, and it is requisito de titulación. So there's a big tie for the students, and it affects the way they see English. Because if they fail at that, it means they will not receive their título, okay? So that makes it, it gives it a lot of friction, their relationship to English. With the universities that we work with, I looked into what type of language requirement they had. Not all US universities may have a language requirement, and it changed. Some of them had just a second language requirement. So the students, even if they were in a university that had it, they had an element of choice. They could decide if they wanted to study Spanish, or French, Italian, Latin, etc., right? So those are the big differences between our students and the students we were working with. Okay, now all our students have to fill out a survey after the session. So these numbers I'm showing you, one of the questions we asked them was, how confident are you with your command of English? This is from the responses we have from spring 2014 to fall 2018. Now, not all students answered the survey. Our numbers are roughly 4,066 students participated in this period of time, and about half responded to the survey, so it's 2,101 students. Now, I really like these numbers because if you see the before, you can see how the high numbers, once you ask them how confident they are after the session, it goes up and the lower numbers go down. So this was great information to me, and this was the basis of my article. But then after finishing the article, I started thinking that I thought these numbers were very biased in a way. And it was a situation of perception. And the perception was because the question was asked at the end of the session. It was, how confident did you feel before, and how confident do you feel now that it finished? We didn't ask them before the session started. We asked them afterwards. So their feelings about where they started, it was a posteriori. So it's a perception, right? So the next step of my research was, okay, let's change the survey. Let's try to survey them before the session and after the session. And that's what we did in spring 2019, which just ended. We had 272 students fill out the survey. And 82 students, not all of the sessions we didn't have enough time before. So we have an adaptive survey where we knew if they were asking it before, they started filling it out, but we tell them, leave it like that, don't complete it until after the session. So we did that. And 82 did it after, so it was still a perceptive answer. but 190 did it before and after. So I felt, look, this is great because that's going to give us better numbers. So roughly it was 70% that answers that we have, and that gives us more accurate numbers. So I want to show you a little bit of the numbers that we have. Now, a different thing too in this case was we asked them about emotions. How do you feel? And we gave them options. They had little icons that went from embarrassed, nervous, confused, upset, sick with worry, happy, excited, etc. Right? So it was really interesting to see the results. So let me show you. Have to load. Let's try it again. Oh, there you go. There you go. Okay, so what I did is I categorized the emojis into negative emotions, positive emotions, and neutral. Neutral was basically confused. And this is the results for all the students. So you see, we have 43% negative, 49% positive, and 8% neutral. Still, positive is higher than negative. But then I thought, when we did this, what happens with the students that have already done Teletandem and the students that are doing it for the first time? So what I did is I filtered that. And I'm going to show you the filtered results. So if I filter into first-timers, it's coming. Okay, these are the filter results. The students that were doing it for the first time, 50% reported negative emotions and 40% reported positive and only 10% neutral. I'm going to show you the repeaters, just so you can see those numbers as well. There you go. For the repeaters, 64% positive, 31% negative, and only 5% neutral. And in this one, we can see the comparison. It's coming. Oh, internet. There you go. So this was very telling to me. First-timers, 50% negative, 31%. In repeaters, 31% negative. So if you notice, for the ones coming back into a Teletandem session, their feelings were more positive. First-timers were more apprehensive. So I thought that was interesting. Now, we also asked them, we gave them an open-ended question, and we asked them to just explain their feelings. And what I did was put together a word cloud that I think is very telling, that nervous was the more common answer. Got confused there as well. Okay, and then we also asked the confident question, and I want to show you the confidence once it's filtered. So this is the general, all students. This is another difference. In the first number that I showed you, the first graph, it was in bulk. So we took the numbers for before the session and after, and just like that, the distribution in levels, and that's it. But here I thought, well, what if we look at each student individually? Because they gave us one number before and one after. So what happens? What's the difference? So this is what we did. What we tracked was, did their confidence increase? Did it decrease, or did it stay the same? So these are the answers. So for all students, 72% reported increased confidence after the session. And 23% stayed the same, and 6% decreased. But then I thought, well, let's filter it between first-timers and repeaters as well. And there you go, first-timers, 79% increased. And repeaters, there you go. Repeaters is not as much increase, it's only 61%. Now here's something interesting, decreased 10%. I haven't gone through that yet, so that's another thing to look into what happened for the repeaters, why did it decrease a little bit more. And this is the comparison. Okay, so to me it was very telling what happened here. So it means that the first time students are faced with Teletandem is when they can make we can make a huge impact in how they feel in their attitude towards the target language and in their motivation, and obviously that will lead you into autonomy. So these are great quotes that I want to read to you. First one is by Bonnie Norton Pierce. When language learners speak, they are not only exchanging information with target language speakers, but they are constantly organizing and reorganizing a sense of who they are and how they relate to the social world. So identity is in flux, it's not static. And the second one is about performativity by Alistair Pennycook. Performativity provides a way of thinking about relationships between language and identity that emphasize the productive force of language in constituting identity, rather than identity being a pre-given construct that is reflected in language use. So to me, that's huge, and students should be aware of this. Their identities are not fixed in stone. Okay, they are constantly building it. We also asked them a question of how do you imagine your partner is going to be? And this backfired royally because they said blonde and blue eyes, and I had to change the question. But one of the questions was, after the session, did it change what you thought about your partner? And these are the answers. I'm not going to go too much into it. And a new question for my research is not going to be what do you think about them, but how do you imagine them? How do you imagine they see you, or what do they expect from you? And that's going to tell us a lot about what our self-conception of our identity is. And the most important part, how does it tie to autonomy? So this was my conclusion. Newly discovered agency through increased confidence, motivation, and self-esteem can have a direct effect on student autonomy. And this is very important because with and I'm breaking from my quote here, through Teletandem, students are realizing they're learning without the mediation of a teacher. Okay, they're learning because of themselves, and they're helping someone else learn. So this is a huge thing for autonomy. And it changes the perception of the language from negative to positive, as their learning of English is not an act of denying the importance of their own self, but part of a cultural exchange where their native language and culture are highly valued. And I think this is very important to us as Mexicans, to give us more credit. And that's about it for my presentation. Thank you very much. I have the bibliography, like some of my sources, and it has QR codes to both my article and this presentation if you want it. And thank you very much.
Le damos las gracias a la profesora Zuleika y si tienen algunas preguntas, tenemos 5 minutos para las preguntas.
Gracias. Tengo un comentario. Esa misma... well, I'm going to switch to English.
Whatever your suggestion was in English. It's fine, whatever you prefer.
From my side, from the United States, when we do these sessions, where I teach, I have a lot of rural students who identify themselves as rednecks. So the rednecks have the same idea that they are inferior to the typical middle-class American. I deal with this type of identity, this conflict of, when I tell them we're going to work with UNAM or students from UNAM, and I tell them what type of university it is, the largest university in Latin America, blah, blah, blah. I decided to stop saying that because the students get so nervous that some of them just don't want to say anything. And this anxiety, or this provokes some anxiety, aside from the anxiety of facing technology. And you probably know this very well, that sometimes that anxiety, the mediated collaboration, is enough to just stop the conversation. And I'm going to tell you something that happened to me. I was helping a colleague of mine during a Teletandem English-Italian, and our student in the United States was of Italian descent. She spoke Italian with her family most of the time, and during the Teletandem, she just
Did not speak.
She left crying. I had to take care of the session, the rest of the session. My colleague went to talk to her, and what happens is that she said, before I felt so free talking to my family, and if I made mistakes, there was no problem. But here, I am talking to a kid who's younger than me. He speaks better English than I speak Italian, and that was a big issue. That was probably the only big problematic situation that I had during a Teletandem session. And you're right, sometimes you don't even know what is going to show up. That identity changes so much, and it changes according to the person who's on the other side. It changes according, I don't know, if they had breakfast or whatever. But it is very important to tell the students that at all times that everything changes, that we cannot depend on technology all the time, and that everything is going to change after you.
Yeah, it doesn't define you. A bad session is not going to define you.
I'm also very intrigued by the lower number with the students.
Yeah, what happens with this?
What happens there? Because I do suspect that what happens is that they went into a higher level of language or a deeper knowledge of culture, and that's probably where they realize that they need to push themselves a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because that happens a lot with my students too.
Yeah, no, that I think definitely after seeing these numbers, and they just, brand new, these numbers, that yeah, I need to go into that, and I think that's great.
I also would like to collaborate with you.
I was going to tell you that because as you seen and mentioned, this is seen only from our point of view. I didn't really look into the other side, and I think it would be really good to do more of a comparative study on this. And I completely agree with everything you've said. We've had situations like that. I used to be the coordinator. Now the current coordinator is sitting behind you. But and I have a lot of our teachers here, and it's really interesting how we've worked in your university with Teletandem, because as a coordinator, I would assign the class and everything. And some of the teachers, they even would tell me, you know what? I didn't tell them we're doing this.
Yes, and sometimes that's better to have a surprise Teletandem.
Yeah, exactly. Less time to freak out.
The very last issue. By the way, all the Catholic universities, Ibero Puebla and Universidad Católica del Uruguay, for example, all of them have the same profile. The students have the same profile. They have more money than my students in the United States, and when they realize that, my students start saying, "Oh my God, we thought that we were, richer and had more
it is an interesting contrast. Yeah. And the funny thing is, even if that's the situation, or just from the point of view of your students, right? They feel inferior. They don't think about those things. They just think that because they are Mexican and our partners are American, we are inferior, or they are inferior, right? But of course, it's part of also perception, right? And telling them, well, do you think there's a reason why they may feel inferior as well? And I think that's part of how rich this experience can be, in making them aware of all those things. But those are great things, and we should collaborate.